Hi, everyone. I'm Siris Rivas-Verdejo, and I am here for the Choosing a Different Future show. I'm so pleased to have our guest for today, Jacob Reid. He is connecting with us from Nevada. Very, very excited. Jacob is definitely creating something totally different in the world, and I'm really excited to be able to speak about it and have you know about what he's creating, to see if you know of anyone that would benefit from this. He has helped so-called schizophrenics, and he puts that in quotes, and I'll let him speak to that, and so that they can access their wisdom and so that they can contribute to planetary healing and to the world. Um, One of the things that I really find fascinating about Jacob, and I definitely want to hear more about, is that he has been on this journey himself, more than a decade, healing and evolving, and in for something that for many it destroys them. There's a lot of people who've had the diagnosis of schizophrenia, and they're not here. Their voices aren't here. They're not being honored. We're not knowing what was going on in their world. And so I'm so grateful that Jacob is here to share his insights on this and his different perspective, to maybe invite all of us to consider something different, around mental health and around schizophrenia specifically. So, Jacob, welcome to the Choosing a Different Future show.
Thank you so much, Siris. It is an absolute honor to be here. I can't tell you what it means. It has been a very profound journey, and I'm just so thrilled that I get to now begin sharing it with people. And so I thank you for inviting me on.
You're most welcome, most welcome. So your website, sacredphrenia.com, I love the name of it. Even just the energy of that is so inviting and really invites us to consider something else, that maybe it's like, wait, what is sacred about schizophrenia? What led you to call it that?
That's a really good question. It's been years in the making. I did not begin my journey with this sacred understanding. I unfortunately began the same way that most people do. I basically fell very ill, and I was essentially told that I had a brain disorder and that there was nothing more to it than that it was simply an imbalance in neurochemistry, and that there was nothing else going on. It took me years before I began to realize that there was a very profound spiritual component to this condition. And I use the word sacred because I want to people that this is a condition deserving our utmost respect. This is an opening, a spiritual opening that we are not currently honoring, and that do I still have you there? Sorry, you were a little choppy.
Yes. So it's a spiritual opening, yeah. And I have found that to be the case for many people who have been diagnosed with any number of different labels.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've mentioned to you that I work with children and adults who have autism and ADD and OCD and ADHD and cerebral palsy and all these different special abilities is how I consider it. And so when I saw your website and I found out about the work that you're doing, it really resonated with me, because I love that it was actually looking at schizophrenia from a place of acknowledging it as a gift and an ability, and not making it wrong, and not making people who have the diagnosis wrong. How has that shifted for you? How are you actually judging yourself less, given the journey you've been on?
Yeah, well, I mean, I will say that when I finally began to realize about 3 years ago or so that there was this spiritual, this sacred component to this illness. That's when my own healing began to really accelerate. And so, it's really interesting. You actually look at these countries where they don't, and these cultures actually, where they don't stigmatize this condition. They actually look at it as a sort of blessing,
Ooh,
such
like
as
in
in
what
India.
country?
Like in India and in many parts of Africa and many indigenous societies, this is quite normal to understand that this is essentially kind of like a shamanic opening. When a person begins to hear voices, for instance, that person is most often pulled aside and told, you are very special. You have a gift that we need you to bring forward. And so in these cultures, it's actually really interesting. Most of these people don't hear negative voices, for instance, and not to say that that's the only symptom that is involved in schizophrenia, or what I call sacredphrenia, but they tend to hear positive voices, like something close to 80% of the people in India who are quote unquote schizophrenic hear positive voices, whereas almost the exact opposite is true in America, where most people hear negative voices.
Well, and I
So,
wonder how much of that is our point of view. Like if they're actually acknowledged and it's seen as a gift, our point of view creates our reality. And so you're going to start looking at, well, where are those voices actually contributing to me and sending me messages that are going to expand my world, or that are a message for someone in my village, in my town, in my community, and actually looking for and being able to distinguish between what's the voices that are speaking what's true and what are the voices that are lying to you. And that practicing that muscle versus like, oh, I shouldn't hear any voices at all, let me block it. And it's still there anyway. Even when you're like, let me block it, let me cut it off, that input is still coming in. So when you actually get to choose to pivot and turn and look at it and be like, let me actually sit with this and receive this without the judgment, I wonder if we would actually have a lot more ease with filtering what's actually true and what's a lie about not just sacredphrenia, but for anybody that's talking to us about mental health in our lives or anything like that,
Yeah, absolutely. It takes so much discernment, and it really is like a spiritual path. It really is, in many ways, a lifelong calling, when you do receive this condition, and of course, as you point out, this is true for all of us, but learning to discern, between truth and fiction in the voices that we hear, in the words that we read and that we hear from other people. It's so complex, and I guess part of the reason that I've stepped into this role now of becoming a guide for these people who are currently lost is that it does take this great discernment, and it takes it takes guidance from people who have basically gone through gone through the path themselves. I mean, I did not have a proper guide in many ways for most of my years that I was severely ill. So
that was my question. My next question. I'm curious, like, one, how it showed up for you, your diagnosis and the symptoms and everything, if you wouldn't mind talking about it. And then how did you get from that place of where you were lost to where you are now, where you don't see it as a wrongness, where you actually get that it's something sacred and something to be cherished?
Yeah, boy, I mean, it's a big story.
I'm
Um,
sure there's a book in the making there. If you could just give us some bullet points,
yeah,
we will
sure.
totally look for the book when it comes out.
Right. Yeah. Oh,
Keep
and
us
it's coming.
posted.
It's coming for sure. Yeah. No, it's in the works actually. But really, and I think this is true for so many of us. My so-called breakdown took place shortly after I became immersed in uh, spiritual everything. I became so enthused with spirituality at the age of 19. It became my entire world. But unfortunately, I dove a little bit too quickly into that sea of information, and I ended up not being able to discern properly the truths from the falsehoods. I got a little bit involved with a cult that actually was, disseminating some very toxic beliefs, and some of those beliefs took hold in my unconscious and my conscious mind. But it did a real number on my psychology. And so, practically overnight, I found myself suddenly living in a world of demons and extraterrestrials and hell realms. And it really took me years to climb out of that. I was just very much lost in the sauce. And fortunately, I listened to my intuition, which told me to not go the allopathic route, not go the traditional psychiatric route that so many people enter. Bless all of them. Uh, you know, this isn't about fighting that system. It's simply about illuminating an alternative. And so, yeah, in my case, I did find some very helpful guides. Some people in the nutritional world. I actually stumbled on a female shaman a few years into it, and boy, she just really changed the entire story for me. She really turned the whole thing on its head, and I for the first time became aware of the possibility. I wouldn't say that I fully became aware of this full sacred quality to schizophrenia, but I did, quickly realize that healing was possible. It showed me that, and so I actually created a self-portrait, and it's on my website in my About section. I created a self-portrait that contains all of the different people and many of the different modalities that were healing for me. And so the people in the self-portrait, they're all kind of embedded in my body, kind of to help portray, this idea that that this healing would not have been possible without them. And
That's
so
really
now, of
beautiful.
course, yeah, I would invite people to check that out if they're wanting to see what I mean. And
And what a
so,
great way to pay an homage to all the people that have been contributing to you actually having what's true for you, like your reality with this.
yeah, I mean, I think art art can truly just be the only medium sometimes through which we can convey, some of these deeper meanings and some of these deeper gratitudes that we have. So, I think like art and music are going to play a big role in this project of Sacredphrenia, kind of helping uh, to spread this word, this message that schizophrenia is very sacred, and that we need this new understanding, this new word. Really, I mean, I'm actually almost at the point where I want to stop using the word schizophrenia. I feel it's a very loaded, very dead, stigmatizing title that we need to get rid of.
Well, and Sacredphrenia I like it. It rolls off the tongue really nicely. It invites people to actually have that reframing that you've been talking about. And
Mhm.
and and so what if that could be what actually becomes the reality in the world, like where people, like everyone starts using Sacredphrenia more, and that's the point of view, that it's actually something sacred. Like what would it take for that to show up, you know?
Yeah, that's my goal. I mean, I know it sounds like a big one, but why not? You know, like
No,
why
act
why
big. I
couldn't
love
that?
it.
Right? Why shouldn't that be the new word? I mean, my you know, a year ago when I finally realized it was time to start going public with this idea, I sort of received that word from the ethers, and I instantly knew that that was like my my real mission was to kind of get that word into the cultural lexicon.
Mhm. Mhm. So, given, you've been creating this cool program, it's about to launch. Super super excited for you, my friend. I mean,
Thank you
wow.
so much.
Like it's so cool to like put out these creations that are creating something totally different in the world and for yourself, and just as an honoring of your journey. And I just know so many people that it can benefit from this. And I was wondering, like, so far of the people that you've been talking to about it, like, how have they been responding to it? Like, what are they saying about it? What questions have they had about it?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. We get so nervous about sharing these deeper truths. You know, a year ago, as I said, I was not quite sure what the public response was going to be, but it's been only positive. I mean, it's been just this outpouring of love. You know, people have been basically like welcoming this idea. Even people who are fairly mainstream, you know, they at least recognize that something has to change. You know, most of us can agree that this stigma, you know, is not benefiting anybody really. So you know, it's like, and of course, I think there's going to be a critical reaction. There's going to be negativity. I expect that. I'm almost kind of uh, excited for that because you know. When I get my first, you know, negative comment or whatever, it's a sign that, you know, maybe I'm starting to ruffle some feathers, which is, you
Yeah,
know, good.
yeah.
So yeah, people, I think not everybody knows quite what I mean when I say sacred phrenia, but it kind of just invokes this idea that people can get behind. And you know, so I think most people are not aware that I'm actually offering this program. I actually have very specific, you know, um, steps for people to take that I feel will help them tap into their their gift. I mean, first of all, to be honest, you have to stabilize a little bit before you can start to really um, bring forth the wisdom that is within you. You know,
Mhm.
many of these people who are lost in the sauce. Um, you know, they do need healing. I do consider it an illness at the same time that I consider it a natural process, a natural, almost like a type of. Lately, I've been calling it like shaman puberty. It's kind of like you know, a person going through their growth pains before they become a shaman, but
Mhm.
they do need to take, you know, specific steps in order to complete that initiatory process.
So let's rewind a little bit, because I
Mhm.
did get from what you were saying that maybe not everyone like seems to just know what Sacredphrenia is, and we've talked about it and alluded to it a little bit. So if you could give like one or two sentences describing what that is for you, like what do you mean when you say Sacredphrenia, I think that would kind of help people out. And then I have so many more questions.
Awesome. Yeah, this is good. So when I say sacred phrenia, I am I'm basically referring to this process of psycho-spiritual death and rebirth.
Okay.
And sorry, you froze there.
I'm
Just
here.
want to make sure that you can hear that. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So when I'm saying Sacredphrenia, I'm referring to this process of psycho-spiritual death and rebirth that is actually necessary. The shamans and the spiritual leaders that we need. So unfortunately, right now with.
So what exactly is dying and rebirthing when you say it's a cycle of death and rebirth?
Right. So when a person experiences a nervous breakdown or a split, a complete unraveling, a complete just demolishing of their ordinary reality, where suddenly they're living in this world where they may experience what we typically call delusions, or grandiosity. They're suddenly living in kind of this what you might call like a myth world, a world of myth. These people are basically plunging into deeper levels of the psyche, of which we're normally not able to access. So that really is a type of death, because they die to their old self. They are no longer subscribing to ordinary consensus reality, and then they are invited to piece themselves back together. It's like a complete dismembering. They are invited to piece their mind back together, to restructure, reorganize their mind, their psyche, until they are whole again. So it is a sickness. It is a horrible ordeal, and I would not wish it upon anybody. I actually wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, because it is so painful. It certainly was in my case. I mean, it may not be in every case, but in my case,
if we actually, one, didn't have the judgment and we were willing to see it as a gift, and we caught it all earlier, and we empowered people to actually recognize it as a gift earlier, if that pain of the transition wouldn't even be there, and it could go right to the empowerment, right to the ease of it, right to the expansiveness that it can be. So there's that aspect of it, because I have heard people say that also with like autism and ADD and OCD and all that. And for me, I'm like, and one of my close friends from high school just told me that his son, who he already had suspected for a while of having autism, was officially diagnosed. And he told me, and I was like, oh my God, congratulations, that's awesome. And he was like, yeah, I think it's awesome too. And he was like, you're one of the only people that is excited about it. Like, he's like, not even my wife is excited about it. She's definitely having a transition, because for me, it's like the more people with autism in the world, the better the world will be, because they're thinking outside of the box, and they're going to be creating something that's never created before. And they're so aware of other possibilities and other doorways. And the only time it's really problematic is when we judge them, and when we don't give them the tools for them to be functional in this reality, as they're recognizing that they're beyond this reality. And so it's not really about them and their tools, and not them and their awareness. That's actually, there's nothing wrong there in my point of view. It's that they're not given the tools, and we're actually kind of failing them as a society, and as an educational system, and as all the institutions, the governments, all of it, when we're not recognizing it as a gift. And so if we actually cut through all of the BS and got to the gift part and the acknowledgement, I wonder how much less pain there would be, how much less suffering there would be, how much less of the trauma and drama around it would even show up. Would it show up? I wonder.
Wow. So well said. So well said. I mean, I can tell that you have been, really acknowledging this theme in its entirety. I know you do that through your work, but it shows, the way you speak about it. And you're so right. If we welcomed these people, if we blessed them, instead of putting this hex upon them of this label, this diagnosis, which essentially kind of programs their experience.
It
They
does
feel
if
that,
they buy it. So one of the things that
right.
I've been looking at with the kiddos with autism and adults with autism is sometimes the label gives you access to resources and services that you wouldn't have otherwise. And so, okay, let's use the system, let's use the label and to create greater possibilities, and actually inviting them to acknowledge that they're beyond the label. So it's like, use whatever words is going to work, that's going to like shake it up and get the services and the things that you require to be successful and to have ease, and know that you're not just this one thing. Just like all of us, like, I'm not just a woman, I'm not just Puerto Rican and Dominican, I'm not just a business owner, I'm not just a podcast host, like whatever this one thing, like it's just like we're that and everything else. And that's one of the things I love about people who have been told that they're wrong for what's going on with them in their mental health, is that they're often so aware of everything and everyone else that they are, and that everyone else is, that no one else is looking at and considering. And it's like, yeah, we are everything. Oh my God. And we've been there and we've done that and over here and over there, and they're doing this and they're doing that, and they're aware of all these people all around the world and in other dimensions, like you're talking about with like hearing the voices, like their voices don't necessarily come from this planet or this dimension either.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's kind of awesome. And like, what if we could actually ask them to use that capacity to their advantage instead of
Mm-hmm.
shutting it off?
Yeah. Or to our advantage,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
As a
how much do we
society in the world.
suffer as a society that we don't receive that wisdom?
Mm.
I mean, it's like it almost explains why we're in this collective spiritual crisis as a culture and as a planet, is that we're not receiving this divinely downloaded uh, knowledge in many cases.
Gosh, I
Um,
know, I love that you said that, because I was thinking about like how they often will say that the cure to cancer is probably like in the Amazon rainforest, but like we're cutting down these rainforests, or like where are all these different things that we're asking for in nature and in the earth, but we're destroying the earth and it doesn't allow us to have access to it, or maybe it's going to be gone now because we of our choices. Um, and
yeah.
the same thing goes with people with these different diagnoses as I'm getting now. It's like, wow, well, how much more things could be possible if we tapped into this plethora, this library of knowledge and awareness that they have, that they're holding, that they're kind of like these beyond the librarians. Like they're like
Yeah.
the gatekeepers in a lot of way of a lot of this knowledge. And could we just like open the gate? Could we just like knock on the door and be like,
Yeah.
hey, we're ready, let's go, let's get this information? Because I wonder if
Right.
that's actually what's going to create something that we can all enjoy and be happy with and be successful, and that the world's asking for. Like so many people are so dispassionate, and they're so lost. And even those that don't have these labels and diagnoses are a lot of lost people out there, and they're looking for something, they're seeking something different. And what if the people that we're actually marginalizing have the key to a lot of the things that we're asking for?
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I had this thought while you were describing the rainforest having, the medicine that we need. And I realized that there are traces of the indigenous way of living everywhere you look, even in our concrete jungles, even in, the heart of unconscious America. We have threads back to the old way of living, back to the old knowledge. And it's like, maybe some of these people are some of our most immediate, you know, sources of this ancient, you know, kind of way. And I love that you have this multifaceted view of these conditions. I think it is important for us to acknowledge, you know, I think that some suffering is necessary. I don't think that any initiation is complete without some real turmoil. And I mean, I love the idea of us being able to just, you know, create this easy empowerment process, you know, for people who are going through this, to just say, hey, look, you know, you're special. Like, we celebrate your gift. You know, I want it to then be like they jump straight to being a shaman, you know, right after that. But even in these indigenous societies, they recognize the crucial role of pain. They recognize the importance of you know, this like dismemberment that I was speaking of, where, you know, where a person is like chopped into little pieces, you know, and then they have to reassemble themselves, because without that, that complete like breakdown, they're not able to appreciate the gift of life and its grandeur, like the gift of having a coherent mind. I mean,
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Okay.
And we don't have to agree on that.
Yeah, sure.
But either way, there is this transition period right now where we're not ready for that immediate actualization, many of us. And so I'm really grateful that people like you exist that can guide people through that transition. If it's slow, fast, at whatever pace a person's willing to go. And if, you know, and a lot of people are suffering now and are in pain now, and they don't have to be. And like, and so, yeah, what if we could invite them to something else? Like, that's one of the things that I, you know, as someone who has had chronic pain and was chronically ill and had a lot of mental health stuff too. I had anxiety, I had depression, I had suicidal thoughts. I had it, and it was, and I definitely wouldn't wish that on anyone. One of the things that I started to loop on was that I started buying from other people that pain what had value and that ease did not. And so it was a lot harder for me to choose ease as quickly as I could have. Now I see that in hindsight, because I was putting that on the pedestal. I was seeing that as more valuable. I was seeing that like that was the only way to have to live my life, to have that relationship with my body. I didn't get that I could actually have the awareness that my body was trying to give me quicker, sooner, before it got to the intensity, got to pain. And I think for a lot of us, with our awareness of things, it starts as a whisper, but then when we don't listen to it, it gets more and more intense and louder and louder and louder until it becomes painful. And then it's so loud that you can't ignore it. But what if we actually caught it at that whisper level before it got to be so intense that it was painful, and then yes, we are suffering. You know, I've had these moments of destruction and rebirth continually. I probably have them multiple times a day, and yet I think a lot of people misidentify and misapply that cycle as something that has to be traumatic. Like, and then we start choosing that and then re-traumatizing ourselves over and over again. I definitely did that with my body and my illnesses for 10, 15 years. It was horrible. And now I recognize that I can have that destruction and the rebirth, the creation and the destruction over and over again. For instance, something as simple as my business. Like, I'll destroy my business and energetically, and invite something else to show up, and kind of do like a, you know how people will take apart a car engine and they'll put it back together, and anything that doesn't work for that engine goes away. Anything that still works, I'm going to keep it in that engine. When I put it back together. Well, I do that with my business and with my relationships with people energetically all the time. And because I don't have the point of view that pain is required with that, then I can actually still have ease with that, taking apart and putting it back together, and taking it apart and putting it back together. I'm not sure if you could still hear me. It froze a little bit there. But it's that my point of view allows me to do that taking apart and putting back together over and over again now, without the pain part, but with all of the awareness. And that's the gift that a lot of the access consciousness tools and the shamanic energy work that I've done, and the theta healing, and the the Reiki, and all these different energetic modalities, it allowed me to acknowledge the gift, but also didn't require me to have the pain anymore. And I wish that more people didn't require the pain. Well, also I get that some of them, that's just where they're at right now. Like that's the starting off point, but it doesn't have to be where they stay. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, I think it does, and I think we actually agree more than we realize. I think that pain plays an important role, but we don't have ritual where we are able to contain pain or suffering within a reasonable process. So because we don't have ritual in our lives any longer as a culture, and because we have a wrong way of living in so many ways, our bodies are just breaking down. So we're experiencing pain in a more elongated, a more traumatic fashion, which is unnatural. And I certainly don't want anyone to be in that place of pain any longer than they have to. I mean, if it's a part of a ritual where they are for a few days, going through this concentrated dose of kind of like simulated suffering in a way, so that they can have more compassion, more empathy for their patients, or for their community members, their friends and family, then that's one thing. But I would agree with you, the epidemic levels of pain that we see in people with both physical and mental, health issues, is just heartbreaking. And my goal is really to accelerate people's recovery, particularly in regard to, this condition we call, schizophrenia. And of course, I'm not a doctor. Nothing I say is medical advice. And, I always have to kind of make that clear, but I can at least share the tools that helped me to recover. And so we can hopefully get people out of these painful, extreme states of consciousness that are not serving them. I mean, certainly, if I could have condensed my healing journey into, a few years as opposed to a decade, and still retain all the little nuggets that I got, all the wisdom nuggets, I would do that. I would not stretch it out, because it was.
Who are you telling, brother? I get that. Oh
yeah,
my God.
it eats away at you, and then you're actually not able to bring forward your gift because you're just too exhausted and too broken down. So I think
burnt out, and in some ways, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think we do agree in more ways than we realize.
And so I would agree with that as well. And and I also love considering different perspectives like this, because that's part of what I think is required with a lot of mental health stuff, is a lot of people are avoiding the uncomfortable conversations. And I'm absolutely willing to have these uncomfortable conversations and these intense discussions to shake things up, and to see what the commonalities are, and where we can actually inspire each other to a different possibility, and for us to consider something else that maybe has never been in existence on this planet before. So gosh, so one more question, Jacob. I was wondering if there was anything, like any one tool that you could provide for people to use that would start them on the path now to actually acknowledging this as a gift, or to start asking questions of themselves to see if the sacred schizophrenia and the Sacredphrenia tools might benefit them. What was something that maybe even you used to start getting on the path, one of those first tools that opened it up so that you got to be more stable, so that you can receive everything else that's showing up for you?
Yeah. So
I
I would
said one
say,
more question and I asked three. I apologize.
yeah, right. I think I can find a way to condense it into one answer. I would say start a dialogue. Start a dialogue with your symptoms, with your suffering, and begin to ask it what it is trying to lead you to. Like stop demonizing it, stop villainizing it, and start seeing it as an invitation to step into a new way of living. I mean, that for me was one of the most powerful things, and it took me years before I was able to start doing that. I would say that, in addition to prayer, although that is a type of prayer, really opening a dialogue with not only the symptoms, but also with spirit, God, a higher power, whatever you might believe in. And if you don't believe in a higher power, boy, like, do everything you can to believe in something that is existentially meaningful, because without that, I don't think that a person can make it very far in this journey where this teacher, really, this spiritual teacher that I call Sacredphrenia, is trying to lead people to their destinations, their destined destinations. So hopefully that would resonate with many people. I would say, like, 2016 was the year when I finally broke through some of my limiting beliefs that were preventing me from communing with the divine. For many of my worst years, I actually was not able to pray at all. My belief systems that originated with that cult that I told you about, they prevented me from speaking to God and speaking to spirit. And so, the more quickly people can, open a dialogue, a really meaningful, sacred dialogue, where you're really intentionally, making it clear that you want to serve the good, you want to serve the planet, you want to be a part of the reclamation, of helping humanity step into the next stage of evolution. When you make that clear, and when you say, so, what are you trying to teach me through all of this? Yeah. Miracles will begin to happen. I mean, it's like you will be shown exactly what you need in order to advance. So I guess I'll leave it at that.
That's wonderful, Jacob. Thank you so much. You said it so well. I'm not going to even add anything else to it. Thank you. And thank you for being on the show and being willing to have this discussion on something that's very, very important and that many people are not willing to discuss and look at, and for inviting us to actually consider a different possibility. I'm so, so grateful for you being on the show. So, so grateful for you being on the planet, my friend. If you want to know more about Jacob Reid, we're going to have all of his contact information below in the description, and you can go to his website, sacredphrenia.com. And please go ahead and subscribe to our channel if you liked our discussion today and you'd like to see more of this. And you can go to choosingadifferentfuture.com to message us through there, or choosingadifferentfuture@gmail.com to email us, whatever way works for you. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully we'll see you again next week for our next episode. Bye.